Hi, I'm JKB, and today on the show I'm reviewing Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, in case you're wondering what is Dragon's Dogma 2, it is an open-world RPG where you set upon a land to defeat a dragon. I mean, when you get to the story in a second here, it's not really rocket science. I will, however, say at the beginning of the game, you're introduced to one of the most robust character creation tools I've seen in an RPG for a very long time. So not only are you able to represent yourself in the game, but you can create basically anybody else. So if you want your mom in the game, or your dad, or your crazy Uncle Joe who threw a pizza at a man once, you can put him in the game. Now, there's a bit of a controversy I'll get out of the way right away. Microtransactions are present in the game, but I do not feel like it hindered my game in any way. However, there was one scenario when I got 4 or 5 hours into the game and I wanted to change the hairstyle of my character. When I got into the town, I realized that, yeah, you have to pay to do that at the barber shop. To change any of the features, that's also a different cost, and guess what? Those are microtransactions in the game. So it's not necessarily blocking those and putting them behind a paywall, but it is essentially saying, yeah, you're gonna have to do a bit of grinding. Now, in terms of wanting to change your hair, I believe that was $10,000 currency in the game. It's not the end of the world to me, but when you're in a pickle and you only have, say, 5,000 and you just want to change your hairstyle, you got to go back in the field or you got to go search in some buildings for a little extra cash. And that right there is quite annoying. So I will bring up the whole greedy transactions in this and just say that at the end of the day, they're present in the game. I feel like they don't really get in your face, you know, like a Call of Duty game from Activision or a terrible game from EA Games, but they're there, and that's something that I think shouldn't be there. So yeah, the microtransactions are in the game, but they're not in your face. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Some people might want to just spend the $1.50 or $2 to change their hairstyle, which, if you want to do that, fine. But I do understand people are frustrated with the microtransactions, so there's my 2 cents on that. Now, I do want to point out I will not be spoiling any of the storyline in this game. I will just say that you are the Arisen in the game. You've been chosen by a dragon, and you essentially have to hunt down that dragon during the whole game as 2 kingdoms battle each other. Now, of course, I said no spoilers, but I'll say that, yeah, the story is definitely not the high point of this game, and in my personal opinion, it's weak. And it's weak to the point where it kind of hinders the game to a certain degree, because I do look at the game and say, could you imagine there was an incredible story behind this? And if there was, I definitely give it a higher score at the end of the review. However, it is an open world RPG that is designed to be about escaping reality and just living in that world. And when it comes to the characters in the game, I'd say a lot of them are very well done. But in terms of what you're listening to in conversations and whatnot, when it has to do with the main story, it just goes over my head. I don't even think about it. Now, in terms of the gameplay, what do you do in this game? There's a term in the game called vocations. Now, your vocation is the character type that you choose. Each character type that you choose, such as a warrior and a mage or a sorcerer, they're going to have skills and abilities and different play styles. And at the beginning of the game, you choose which vocation you want to use. So you can be an archer, a warrior, a thief, or a mage. Like I said, each of those have different abilities, skills, and different gameplay elements to them. So I really will break that down quickly here and say that each one of them is highly different than the other one. We're talking about close combat, we're talking about distance combat. We're talking about a system that changes up live as you're playing it based on which boss battle you're going up against. So sometimes you will want to go up close to an enemy, but you might be a mage who should not get close to an enemy. That is the gameplay element that makes this interesting, because you need to choose as a player, how do you want your playstyle to be? Do you want to be up close and personal like a thief, or do you want to be far away like an archer? It's all down to how you want to play the game. And of course, I'll point out that you can change your vocation as you get deeper into the game. And yes, without spoiling anything here, there are more than 4 vocations in the game. Now, when it comes to the combat itself and how it feels, there's one thing I do need to bring up. There's a built-in targeting system in the game that I think a lot of people are going to find frustrating right off the start. It's something that takes a little bit of time to get used to, because when you approach an enemy in this game, you have an auto target system. So if you are a mage or an archer, you automatically will face that person, and as you attack or shoot your bow or throw magic at it, it'll automatically select something on screen to do that. You are able to push to the left or to the right and select a different target, but it's not always very clear on screen exactly where you are targeting. And that can be very frustrating until later in the game when you start to understand how that system works. Now, I should point out, as you switch your vocations between somebody that is close combat versus somebody that is at a distance, you will see the systems change, and sometimes you will notice things change in a major way. For instance, when you use the mage, you do not have a block ability at the beginning of the game, which makes you want to stand back from the enemies. However, when you use somebody that is close quarters, they're able to hold a shield and you are able to block. So hopefully you understand the combat types in the game. While the targeting system is very, very frustrating at the start, you do start to understand how it works. And once you get over that little learning curve on how combat works in the game, and when you get to the monsters, which I'll talk about in a second, the gameplay becomes addictive, rewarding, and something that you will want to do over and over. So hopefully that clears up all of the combat types. And like I said, without spoiling, there's more than 4 of them. So as you're going through the game, you're able to switch it up. So if you're sick of being a mage or a sorcerer, you could switch it up to a thief who is quick and nimble, and also has an ability I'll talk about now. One of the biggest reasons I'd say go out and buy this game is the combat with the gigantic monsters on screen. Again, I'm not going to spoil any of them in this review. You may see some footage of a few little trolls here and there, but you have not seen anything yet. And of course, one of the biggest draws to using a character that's up close and personal, like the thief, is the ability to be able to target parts of that monster from a very, very close proximity to the monster. So we're talking about climbing the monster. Let's just get to it. That's what you're gonna do in this game. And trust me, when you are up close and personal with these enemies and climbing on their backs, there's nothing more rewarding than taking down a troll by stabbing him in the back of the head, or taking down a flying enemy by standing on the back of it as it's 100 meters above the level, taking it down and watching it crash to the ground. It's spectacular. So overall, in terms of the combat with the giant monsters, I mean, that's why you're buying this game, and I give it a huge positive. I highly recommend the game if you're into the RPG elements of past games in the genre. I mean, you can't beat a game like this. It's done in such an amazing way with such passion that I'd be failing miserably if I didn't really express my joy over the combat in this game. It is just on another level, and I think everybody that has played the game and gotten to level 30, they're all addicted to battling monsters. I do want to say that the map is 4 times the size of the original game, and that is amazing to see. There's one thing I do want to say. If you are into RPGs, then yes, there are tons of abilities in this game that are unlockable for the combat, but when it comes to potions and spells, you really have to go off the beaten path to find some of the items that you're going to be using to craft some of the potions that you'll want to use in the game. Of course, like all great RPGs, you're going to find secrets, caves, you're going to find forests. However, there's going to be giant trolls in the forest or in a cave, so be prepared for that, but also make sure you really go through that cave and find the chest at the end, because you're always going to get a cool little item when you really explore in this game. Now, I want to bring up how the gameplay works in terms of your AI teammates. They're known as pawns in the game. You're able to create one right off the bat. As you can see, my pawn here is absolutely gorgeous and 90 years old. As for how the pawn system works in the game, it's quite simple. You have these stones that you'll come across in the game, and from those stones, you're able to essentially hire a new pawn. You can have 3 pawns on your team at any point in the game, and the pawns can have the same vocations as you can have in the game as well. So this means that you are in charge of their inventory, their leveling up, and all of their abilities. So as you embark upon your journey, you'll notice that your pawns are actually quite smart in the game, and that's another big positive to this game. The AI teammates are incredible. You'll notice that the pawns are going around the map and talking to you and giving you hints. You should always listen to your pawns because they're going to be giving you vocal hints about the situation you're in. They'll warn you if you're about to get into a hairy situation. They'll warn you if you're crossing a bridge and you might not see a chest down below in the river. They'll actually go out there and even collect those things for you. And of course, all of these pawns have the different vocations that you can choose. So you might run into a pawn on your journey and just hire them on the side of the road, or you go to one of the sort of spawning, little points in the game where you can, reincarnate them if they get killed in battle. So overall, in terms of the pawn system, it's obviously a major aspect of the game, and I don't want to understate that. You're going to always have them with you. You can add favorites, and of course, like I said at the start here, you can build your own at the beginning, and that one will follow you forever throughout the whole game. You can include 3 on your team, and it is just an amazing thing to watch because it plays into the vocation that you chose. So if you've chosen to be a mage, and you have 2 warriors and an archer on your team, the mage has the ability to enhance weapons, not just your weapons as yourself, but you're able to add like ice effects or fire effects to their weapons. So you might be hanging back as a mage and just shooting spells at a dragon while your 2 warriors are up close and personal and climbing on the back of the dragon. This is where you want to be able to cast spells upon your own teammates, like the ice ability or the fire ability. You'll notice their weapons will light up blue or red based on which cast you put onto it. And that is when this game really opens up, because you're headed into a battle and you realize you're not really alone. Utilize your pawns. So in closing, you're able to really create a team that you want for a battle. So if you're going up against a troll, you don't want just a bunch of archers. You want somebody up close and personal that's going to be able to get on the back of that troll as you're casting spells. That's where the game shines, and that is essentially why you play this game. Now, in terms of side quests, I can't say that they're the best. They're typical things like go over here and deliver some berries to some guy in a forest, which is kind of creepy. So while the side quests are all right, I wouldn't say that the game has a major selling point because of the side quests. I'd say for the most part, I found a lot of the side quests just by simply going into a cave that turned into like a 3-hour ordeal where I was fighting a cave troll that had hair on it. Now, let me get to the visuals. The game looks stunning at times. However, some of the character models look laughable. I don't understand what's going on here because it's a scaling system. Some of the vistas are jaw-dropping and some of the graphics are almost photorealistic. But when you get up close and personal with some of the character designs in this game in the open world, it's not spectacular, it's okay. And when it comes to using a sorcerer in the game and you're shooting fire and ice at enemies, wow, this is where the game shines visually. And I'd put it up there just with the visuals of those vistas. It's just as cool to see a fight in the game as it is to just stand still and take in the scenery. Let me get to the pros and cons of the game. The first thing I have to say is, it's not a perfect game. I saw some people giving it a 10 out of 10 and I'm just like, I can't do that, due to the fact that the camera at times is so frustrating. We're talking about small cave situations where the camera's getting stuck on the wall and it's getting stuck in a corner and you're getting your ass handed to you by a cave troll. You have no idea what's going on. He's just beating the shit out of you in a corner and the camera is like locked onto the back of your head. It's not even at a distance. We're talking about frustrating situations that unfortunately do hinder the game at times. And early on in the game, you realize, oh, this isn't the best camera system. So I do suggest you can go into the system preferences of the game and pull that camera away from you a little bit. Camera's just not great at times when you're in closed situations. The second thing I want to talk about that I think is laughable is the interactions with the characters on screen. When you come up to an NPC and you hit the button to talk to them, all of a sudden you go to this camera that is just awkward. It makes no sense. You can't really see your team behind you. You could barely see yourself on screen. It's not like he's looking into, like he's not breaking the fourth wall and looking into the camera unless you leave the camera right in front of you. If you move it off to the side, it's just a guy standing there like blabbing for 5 minutes. And the other thing I gotta point out is that the text or the dialogue as it's happening on screen, he'll say a sentence and then he'll just stop talking, and you literally have to hit next. And then you have to wait, and then he'll say a little more, and then you're like, are you done? Okay, you're done. Next. And then he'll talk more, and there's no auto. There's no auto ability to just have a conversation with any of them. You have to keep hitting next, and sometimes you'll hit next when they weren't done talking. So now you've lost that forever, essentially, unless you want to talk to them again. Hope for the best that they say it again, but it's just a really awkward system. And when it comes to the story and the characters in this game, especially with the ones obviously that you interact with other than the pawns are amazing to interact with when they're on your team, but the NPCs in the game, wow, they have some issues and it's not good. Last but not least, on PC, just frame rate is all over the place. I've seen people with like 4080s, they can barely get over 30 frames per second. I mean, it's slightly embarrassing for Capcom to release such a mess of a game on PC. But I have to also say I've seen some people with other configurations that have no issues. So realistically, I don't really know what's happening there. Obviously, it's not a very major issue out there, and a lot of the review bombing that's happening has to do with the microtransactions. But if you're thinking like, I'll wait for a bunch of patches on PC, the game is playable above 30 frames, between 30 and 40 on PC. It's not something that I would say is a terrible thing, but I did want to point it out in the review here that, yeah, you're not going to be hitting 60 for the most part on a lot of systems out there. Now, when it comes to the PlayStation 5 version of the game, I'm not really seeing any major issues. There's very slight pop-in at times. Sometimes the pawns will climb the side of a wall and just float in midair. I mean, these are small things compared to the epic scale of the game. Overall, I give the game an 8 out of 10. I think that the story is not spectacular, and dealing with this camera at times really does hinder the experience. The real reason why I love this game is the combat and the vocations. To be able to switch your vocation as you're playing this game and not be locked into just being a mage the whole time, that was a huge deal for me. When I realized you could do that, and it didn't really hinder the gameplay experience, because yes, you are leveling up all sorts of things in this game, but you are collecting things for different vocations as you're playing the game, and you can store those on, in storage boxes at inns. So you don't have to worry about like, hey, I don't have like a really good weapon. I've switched from a mage to a warrior, and I got a crappy weapon. By the time you get that far into the game where you can actually switch it out, you'll have weapons, you'll have money, you'll be able to go to the shop and purchase things for the new vocation that you've chosen. Now, there's a few little nitpicks at the end here that I want to bring up, because some people are asking me about them. Yeah, there's no real fast travel in the game except when you use these special stones. They're not really hard to come by, but yeah, they're part of the microtransactions. You can buy a stone that'll let you essentially fast travel to a village, but at the end of the day, it's weird because it's not one of these games where I'm like really angry that I can't fast travel. The game is so much fun when you're walking around, in my personal opinion, that yeah, you may have to walk for like an hour to get to a town, but it's about that challenge. But I do have to say, at times it can be frustrating due to the fact that as you are in battle with these giant monsters, you will lose the ability to get to 100% on your health bar. It actually goes down over time, and by the end of some of these battles, you can only recharge your character to say 20%. That might be frustrating to a lot of people out there, and I just wanted to bring it up in case people didn't realize that, yeah, this is a full tilt RPG, and there's a lot of elements that they're pushing the boundaries on. The idea to fast travel in a game, I always thought was like, yeah, of course we all use it because you don't want to walk around a map for 20 minutes, 40 minutes to get back to where you were. But at the end of the day, I do have to say, and people may say I'm crazy for this, but I don't mind walking around in this game because there's so many secrets and the battling system is amazing. And there's always a way to keep your character alive for enough time to get back to the villages. So in closing, 8 out of 10. I highly recommend it to anybody out there that's really into, and I'm talking about the hardcore RPG combat. We're talking about real systems at play here that have to do with how you take on each monster. So there's real thought process happening. You're not just going into a battle and hacking and slashing. You have to essentially plan out some of these attacks. You can't just rush in with your pawns and think you're going to win. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review of Dragon's Dogma 2. I'll see you next week with Rise of the Ronin review. It's a game, but maybe it's not as bad as you think it is. Thanks for the support, and I'll see you guys tonight for movie night at 8 p.m. EST on the Discord if you are a Super or Ultimate Legend. Thank you guys. I love you.